and Committee on Agriculture and Environment Senate Committee's hearing for opening the informational briefing.
One on the west side, and as chair of the Agriculture and Environment Committee, on my left, four on Hawai'i Island.
And also present to my right is Kim, representing Kalihi and chair of higher ed. Okay, so this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube, and the briefing materials can be found. And because we expect the military as being within an hour, that we will be able to have questions, and we will allow for limited questions after we'll be able to answer. Okay, and you don't need to answer right there and then if another presenter will.
Zoom, representing District 13.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and with that.
And everyone else here, good afternoon, aloha. Thank you so much for the opportunity to brief you today. I am Vice Admiral John Wade. I'm Commander. Got Captain Ted Carlson, who is the Chief of Staff at Navy Region Hawaii. And then also to his right is Dr. Kevin Nakamura from Defense Health Timeline Overview.
Okay, excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but we also have Senator Glenn Waxy.
Okay, wonderful. So on the first slide, it's just a Red Hill timeline overview on the upper right now. I call it the Red Hill problem set with the May of 2021 spill. What I wanted just for you to take away before we start the brief, this is contextual, is that the Red Hill's position as the Joint Task Force Commander to defuel the Red Hill facility. Defueling sets the conditions for closure, which is a Navy responsibility. Hence why Navy Region Hawaii is a number of issues that have occurred throughout the facility's 83-year history. And that responsibility is also a Navy responsibility. Military families and community members that were impacted medically. And because of that, the Defense Health Agency network fueling. So if we can go to the next slide. It's titled Mission and End State. And there's a lot of words here, but this is the direct to safely and expeditiously defuel the Red Hill facility to set the conditions for closure. And the second, build the trust that was lost because of the worst in this last year in this job, that to earn with Red Hill. And so I'm honored to go to the next slide, please. It's titled Red Hill Defueling Plan. It's just a big picture overview of the command. A little over a year ago, there was a robust assessment planning, but then preparation at the state level, State of Hawaii Department of Health. And it's titled the Joint Task Force Red Hill Integrated Master Schedule Executive. And that is that when I took this mission, I promised a discipline. We did what was called a requirements traceability assessment. We went through every state and federal law, consent order, and at the time, just about a year ago, there was a draft consent order to either set the conditions for or to execute during defueling. And in addition to all those requirements review findings, all the recommendations, and in doing this analysis, we put together a work breakdown structure of everything that we needed to do. And it's summary we call in project management a gate review to ensure that we're on plan, or if we're off plan, what do we need to do to get back on plan? Again, the EPA and the Department of Health. And if you look at the very bottom, the Department of Defense, every service is represented on the Joint Task Force: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, uniform members, active, reserve, guard, and also civilian and contractors. On the interagency governmental side, you had at the federal and the state level, the EPA and the Department of Health. But at the federal level, on Congress, a number of people involved to get us the resources to be able to do what we're doing right now. And then there's been robust coordination and collaboration at the state, city, and county level in the unlikely, but to ensure we're ready for any type of contingency, specifically a spill or a fire, working with HAIMA and the Department of Emergency Management. So that then coupled with a multiple sector approach, those sectors are fuel, safety, repair, and environment to build this plan. This plan was worked through, and I'm proud to say at the very top that we actually commenced defueling on 16 October. The next 3 slides I'm going to go through very briefly, and it's just going to give you a big picture thumbnail look of how we're doing the defueling. And I'll be prepared to answer any detailed questions when we get to the question and answer period. So the first slide is titled Defueling Phase 5 Alpha. That's gravity defueling, and it's the main tanks. And many of you, I'm sure, have visited Red Hill. It's a facility that contains 20 enormous tanks, 250 feet in height, 150 feet in diameter, can fit the Statue of Liberty with room to spare. Again, 104 million gallons. And the theory of this defueling is using gravity to do the work. And if you were to go to a water cooler, stand in front of it, open the lever, and the water would flow out of the valve, it's the same principle, obviously a lot more complex, a lot of valves and sequencing and procedures that are required. But the fuel will go out through a large pipeline. If you see at the bottom left, you see a tank main fuel line into the main pipeline down to tankers at Hotel Pier on Joint Base Pearl Harbor. This main effort, which will remove 98% of the fuel, or 102 million gallons, is ongoing and is projected to be complete on or about 18 November. If you've seen Pearl Harbor, there's a number of tankers that are there. Right now, there's 6, and we're basically cycling tankers in and out. And if you look at the lower left, there is a call-out box that a portion of the fuel is redirected to the upper tank farm. Those are above storage tanks at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. And that is to ensure that our fleet and Air Force operations and training continue. As you know, it's a dangerous, complex world, and we need to keep all operations ongoing. So it's all sequenced and layered in. So again, this phase will remove the preponderance of the fuel, 102 million gallons, about 98%, complete projection on 18 November. Next slide is titled Flowable Tank Bottoms. And it's the same principle of the main tanks, but it's a lower amount of fuel. It's what the fuel is at the bottom of the tanks, about 140,000 gallons in each of the tanks. And it will be removed from a much smaller line, which is called the tank fuel oil recovery line, which you can see in the lower left. It's a 4-inch diameter, and that's because it's the very bottom of the tank. And so the flow rate is a little bit slower, but it's the same principle. It goes into the main pipeline and then down to tankers. And this activity is projected to be conducted from the 4th to the 15th of December. And when this is complete, on the 15th December, 99% of the fuel will be removed. Go to the next slide. It's titled Unpacking. And in this phase, we remove the fuel that is in the pipeline. And that will occur over a week period from 15 January to 19 January, again, using gravity as the force to pull the fuel down to an area with the red circles 1, which is just at between Adit 2 and 3. Those are tunnel entrances about maybe half a mile from Joint Base Pearl Harbor. And then at that point, we'll have to use pumps from Joint Base Pearl Harbor to pull and suck that fuel into one of the tanks on the base. And when we complete that unpacking, we'll have removed 99.9% of the fuel. And I'll get to what's next in a couple of slides. But those 3 slides are the current phase of defueling, gravity defueling, that is ongoing and is scheduled to be completed by 19 January. What I want to do now is just tell you where we are. And this slide is the update as of yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I'm expecting another update in about 30 minutes. So while we're still here, I'll give you an update. But I project that at 2 o'clock today, we'll be over 57 million gallons removed in the 2.5 weeks that we've been conducting the defueling. So we went over 50% of the fuel that sits above the aquifer here in the last 24 hours. Next slide. So when I spoke with Senator Sam Buenaventura, she asked for an update on what are we doing to reduce risk, because this is a very complex, high-risk evolution. And as you've heard me before, nothing like this has ever been done. There was no playbook. There was no blueprint of what we needed to do. We had to consult with the fuel industry, with the safety industry. We hired consultants. We followed all the rules with the regulators to build redundancy into this plan. I call it a risk ecosystem, to take a quote from a book I read in my self-study in taking on this mission by retired General Stanley McChrystal. And what it is, it's taking actions to reduce the likelihood and the severity of a potential mishap. And I'm just going to briefly highlight what we've done, and we could answer questions if required. But on the upper left, there's plans and operations. And also on the lower right, you see fuel operations. If you were to do a summary of the investigations from May and November of 2021, the procedures that were being used at Red Hill were not exacting. In other words, they were not precise enough. And on top of that, there was a culture of procedural non-compliance, a lack of supervision, and there were inadequacies in the training program. Those coupled together were contributing factors to the mishaps in 2021. We took all those on to build a robust training program, to bring in great people, to conduct proper supervision, to do sets and reps, blocking and tackling with respect to training, so that the workers and the team inside the mountain and working in the control room have the confidence and the competence to execute their duties. If you go to the bottom, you see a robust test and safety and quality assurance bucket. And in that, working by, with, and through the regulators, while we were doing repairs, enhancements, and modifications, what were mandated by the state emergency order, we went through with a quality validation process with multiple checks and balances. The contractor would assess and inspect their work. Then the government would audit that work. And then a third-party engineering firm would inspect and then provide that data to the regulators, who then conducted their own inspections to review. So at least 4 or 5 reviews of every job. And on the test side, a robust pipeline integrity that included pressure, hydrostatic testing, radiation testing, pipeline stress and structural analysis, tank tightness, sump tightness, even a cyber resiliency test to ensure that the equipment being used is safe and free of any type of activities from those that may have ill intent. Also, a review of the integrity of every single valve and every other piece of equipment. And then lastly, on the fuel operations, again, tabletop rehearsals, dress rehearsals, walkthroughs, and then observations by the regulators to ensure that we're following our procedures with exacting precision, and also our communications, so that we were best prepared to execute the task. And our guiding principles for all this was always continuous improvement. So we would always assess and cull lessons learned and provide those into our plans for high velocity learning. And also a respect for the dangers that we faced, and leave no stone unturned as we built this robust multidimensional plan. But even though we built a robust plan to reduce risk, we assumed that there could be a problem. And therefore, we needed to prepare in case there was a contingency, either a spill or a fire. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I want to just highlight the response preparedness that we've taken. And again, everything by, with, and through the regulators. But if you looked at the investigations from May and November of 2021 on the response side, the two key contributing factors there was that the training program for those who would respond was inadequate. And they also determined in the investigations that the assessments that were conducted at the initial outset of the spills were not sufficient enough to understand the enormity of the problem that they were facing. Had there been greater training, had there been a better assessment process, I am sure that actions would have been conducted differently. So we've taken all those lessons learned, working again with federal, state, and local officials, with local integration, and we've conducted drills, 18 total with the Navy and the JTF and HAIMA and the Department of Emergency Management. But since the Joint Task Force took the responsibility of defueling, 6 drills, crawl, walk, run approach, with oversight provided by EPA and DOH, grading us, giving us feedback, and all the lessons incorporated into our plan. That includes what would we do, immediate actions and controlling actions for a spill, and then immediate and controlling actions if we had a fire. And I can go into details if you have any questions. But even though we have the risk reductions and everything that we have done for preparedness for a contingency, we still understand that water is life and that no matter what, we needed to protect the aquifer in the unlikely event that we had an issue. So again, working with safety experts and then with the regulators, we implemented over 400 protective measures to safeguard the aquifer. And these included a, no kidding, every square inch walkthrough with engineers, inspectors, and the regulators, and went through every crack and sealed them. Every drain was sealed. We have encapsulated every valve and put primary and secondary containment underneath. So if there was a leak, it would drip or flow into a pool, which was surrounded by another pool, and then absorbent material, and then personnel at every location to have eyeballs and visibility on the facility. In addition to that, we've installed over 40 temporary cameras that provide 24/7 coverage of every square inch of the facility. And we also added 70 men and women, volunteers from the Hawaii Air National Guard, who are conducting what we call roving security fire watch, that 24/7 walking through the facility with mirrors, flashlights, vapor monitors to look at the integrity of the pipeline and all the equipment to ensure that if there is a problem, we identify that problem as quickly as possible and then rectify it immediately. We also have barriers to deflect if we were to have a spill, fuel away from the aquifer. We've installed extra pumps, and we've also installed where there are weak points in the pipeline. And when I say weak points, from an engineering analysis and calculations, that we have a material that is placed around it so that if there were a leak that we call atomized, so it becomes a spray, it contains it so that it won't get into an electrical panel or hit a heat source, which can lead to a fire. And this is all through fuel consultants, safety consultants, fire engineers, everything here done to either protect the aquifer and prevent any fuel from, or if there were a major spill, the least amount to get into the aquifer. Next slide, please. My commitment since taking this mission on has been continuous engagement and transparency with our community and our military families and elected officials. I truly believe that engagement has two components. The first is continuous communication of what we're doing and why, but then also active listening. And I just want to say it again, I'm on the record, but the active listening part has been very, very helpful to my team and I in a number of reasons. One, it has helped us better understand the concerns by the community and our military families. I will tell you that it has given us greater purpose and meaning for everything that we are doing. And quite honestly, the community's questioning attitude and why are you doing this? And what about this? And I don't understand, has allowed us to rethink how we are doing our operations. And it's made us look at it and how can we communicate and make things more simpler on one hand, or has given us a realization that maybe there's things that we can do to even reduce risk even further. And we have talked with supporters and we've also talked with critics. And the only way to move forward, I believe, is to have these conversations, no matter how difficult they are. And it's made us stronger. And I hope that you've seen our commitment, and we will continue as we proceed through defueling. And on the lower right is just an example of some of our outreach. We have an active website, but we also have a mobile app. That mobile app now has close to 80,000 subscribers downloaded through either Apple or Google iOS. We're providing daily updates or as required. And again, persistent engagement to keep the community informed. All right, I'm almost done. This is just a slide that you've seen before, but I've now moved the orange box to the very bottom of phase 5, and it's called phase 5 Bravo, and that's called residual fuel. So we're in phase 5 Alpha right now, which is gravity defueling, but there's going to be what's called residual fuel when we're done. That means there is fuel that we can't get out of the facility because it's in low point drains or in bends within the facility. You just can't access with gravity. So a perfect vignette or example is if you go to your kitchen sink, and you open up the door and you've got a catch underneath that sink, that pipe that's bent, and there's always liquid in there. That's the same principle that we will have in Red Hill. There's over 180 low point drains in the 3.5 miles of pipeline. The amount of fuel that will be in the facility, if you can go to the next slide, please, of residual fuel through detailed laser surveys, we've gone through every square inch of the pipeline, is that there will be approximately 64,000 gallons of residual fuel. Of that 64,000 gallons, we can remove 60,000 gallons with the environmental laws and approvals that we have in place that allow us to access that fuel by opening those low point drains or opening valves to be able to pull that fuel out. And we project, and these are the locations, there's about 25,000 gallons of residual fuel in and around the tank gallery and 35,000 gallons in and around the pump house, which is on Joint Base Pearl Harbor. Once gravity defueling is completed, we will immediately start getting after the residual fuel, and we forecast that pending regulator approval that we can remove the 60,000 gallons of residual fuel in 60 days from 22 January till about 31 March. If you go to the next slide, there are other products that will be in the facility that we can't access readily. And that is 4,000 gallons of residual fuel that are in sags in the pipeline. What do I mean by that? In the 83 years of the facility's existence, some of the foundations just have settled. And so there are pockets of fuel that can't be accessed through low point drains. If you were to look at a gutter after a rain, you see indentations in the gutter, and there's just a pool of water there that can't get out. It's the same thing. And in order to access that fuel, you have to physically destroy the pipeline to physically get after that fuel. That will require a separate environmental assessment, because when you physically destroy the pipeline to access that fuel, it creates a potential pathway for that fuel to get into the environment. So there's 4,000 gallons, 1,000 by the harbor tunnel and about 3,000 at the tank gallery. And that will be turned over to the Navy for part of their closure process. And the reason why is because that activity of pipeline destruction needs to be sequenced with another key aspect of their plan, and that is tank cleaning. A byproduct of sediment collecting in fuel is called sludge. It's a semi-hard liquid material that settles at the bottom of the tanks. And each of the tanks that have fuel in it have sludge. And it's estimated that the sludge total in the 14 tanks that have fuel in it equals 28,000 gallons. And it is already part of the Navy's closure plan to remove that sludge, but each tank will take approximately 120 days to remove that sludge. It requires entrance into each tank by humans. They have to then scoop it up, put it into barrels. The barrels have to be removed from the facility. But again, because it has a potential pathway into the environment, there are strict environmental rules by the regulators, and that also has to be sequenced along with all the other closure activities. There's asbestos, there's lead, there's PCP, there's AFFF that needs to be removed. So the Navy is building a holistic integrated master plan and a schedule that they will have to integrate all this into their plan, and Captain Carlson will talk about that. But suffice it to say that the Department of Defense is absolutely committed to get every drop of fuel and every toxic material that is in the facility. Again, defueling, the removal of the 104 million gallons is the start to set the conditions for the long-term closure process, which will take several years. So what I've done is I've provided context. I've gone over our approach for defueling. I've described what defueling is and the current status, what we've done to reduce risk, how we're prepared for a contingency, how we've protected the aquifer, and then what is next with respect to residual fuel. And I'm ready to turn it over to Captain Carlson, or if there were any immediate questions now, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Admiral. I just want to open it up for a short question and answer. So let's go to the right first, Senator Kolole, Senator Kim. Any questions of Vice Admiral Wade at this time? Okay, on the left, we have Senator Wakai, Awa, Moriwaki, Richards, Senator Gabbard. No questions, right? I have a short question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, regarding your air monitors. So
Okay.
a constituent had asked, why is it that you folks don't have, fixed air monitors during the defueling process? I mean, you described volunteers having these air monitors, I guess, when they're patrolling the area, but why don't you have fixed ones in the areas where you are defueling so that we know whether or not, these atomic potential, fire hazards may erupt at any time. So what's your answer to that?
Senator, we do have air monitors.
And they are fixed.
Well, they're portable, but they're in a static location. There are, I think there are 13 in and around the Red Hill facility. And then there's another number, and I can turn that over to Navy Facilities Engineering Command, because they have monitors at all of our DoD locations too. when we learned that Navy Region and NAVFAC were putting in these air monitors to do a 6-month study for baseline, we thought that this would be an ideal opportunity to, again, reduce risk as part of our multi-layered approach to identify any threats that could impact the community or those that are working in the facility. So that's part of our layered plan. And when I talked about the roving security fire watch, they have portable monitors, but that's for their safety and security. So if they go into an area and all of a sudden they have an alert that there is a combustible material or something that is replacing oxygen, they then know what their immediate procedures are to don oxygen and then to get away and then to immediately report. But in addition to air monitors, we have soil vapor monitors. We also are robustly testing the water to ensure that we're monitoring in case any fuel has spilled into the aquifer. And Captain Sullivan can go into explicit details when he gives his brief.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I forgot. Senator Rhodes, are you on? I didn't see
Yep,
him.
I'm here. No questions at this point,
No,
though.
no
Thank you.
question? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so let's hear from
Thank you.
Officer Carlson.
Over to me. Well, aloha and good afternoon, Senators. Again, I'm Captain Ted Carlson. I'm the Chief of Staff at Navy Region Hawaii. I work for Admiral Barnett, who sends his respects and apologies for not being here, but he's back in Virginia right now as part of work and also to see his brand new grandson who was just born last week. So let's talk about the next phase. So closing Red Hill. I will apologize in advance. I'm not as well polished as Vice Admiral next to me, and not as many slides. But if we turn to the next slide, I've broken down the closure efforts into transition, closure, beneficial reuse, community outreach, and then I'll turn it over to Captain James Sullivan to talk about remediation. Beginning with transition, right now, the Navy is standing up an organization whose sole mission is the safe closure of Red Hill. And part of that is rebuilding public trust through those actions. The name of it, if it's 151 people or 152, is up in front of SecDef right now. So I'm limited on what I can say in the official realm, but I expect in the next couple of weeks to be able to speak more to that. But we understand the mission that we're accepting and taking over from JTF, and we have already marched out on that, hiring people, and those people are on board right now. We are modeled after JTF Red Hill, and we are working and learning side by side with them, especially during the transition period. So Admiral Wade talked about the defueling phase 5 Bravo residual fuel. We're going to have the bulk of this task force on site and learning exactly what to do from the task force and from their successes. So we are going to basically do the same thing and achieve the same high standards that the JTF has achieved, same transparency, and the same commitment. This is not a simple hand over the keys, you had it, we have it. No, we're going to learn from their success and continue that on. Personnel are arriving, as I said, and we expect to be fully mission capable at the end of JTF's residual fuel sometime in and around March 2024. Moving on to closure, just like defueling, this is an extremely complex, multifaceted operation to close this facility. And it will take some time to do it right, because we have to do it safely and we have to do it in coordination with our regulators, EPH and DOH. We are prioritizing the removal of the AFFF, getting that sludge out, cleaning the tanks, and removing the 10 miles of pipeline that is currently up there, which is a commitment by the Department of the Navy that this facility will never be used for fuel again. We have to assess everything up there. We suspect there's lead and asbestos that will have to be mitigated. And we have to ensure that everything is environmentally and structurally safe, and that the monitoring is in place for years to come, as the Navy has an enduring responsibility for this facility. It's not simply turning off the lights and locking the door. We understand that responsibility. And we are committed to ensure that Red Hill is closed and the INA is restored and protected. We anticipate this process is going to take some time. The tanks themselves are going to take 3 years to clean and close. And then we have all the ancillary action items that we have to do. Our preparations are currently underway, getting contracts and material on place, but we will not begin until the facility is defueled by JTF. And that's for safety reasons. Moving on to beneficial reuse. As some of you probably know, there are 3 studies ongoing right now. All these studies will be submitted to Congress in February of 2024. You have the Nakapuna study that we are working currently. The final report will be done in a couple weeks, and that will be made public. We also have the University of Hawaii study being run through the Office of Navy Research, as well as the RAND study, which was part of the National Defense Authorization Act. So those 3 studies on beneficial non-fuel reuse of the tanks is being submitted to Congress and will be made public. And then the state of Hawaii, DOD, and the EPA will review, discuss feasible options, and the inputs collected will be used to inform the final decision. Moving on to community outreach, rebuilding trust is paramount with the community, our neighbors, and also with our military members. That trust was broken. We can do a better job telling our neighbor's story, being open, being understanding, but we also need to do a better job listening, as you said, sir. And we are working on that. From neighborhood board meetings, Kapuna councils, local city and state organizations, from west side to east side, to north shore to south to central, we want to sit down and talk not only about Red Hill, but other issues that we can partner with. Last week, I met with the Army and local leaders and went to Kolikoli Pass. We talked about the possible use of the pass as an evacuation route should there be an emergency in Waianae, and also if Farrington Highway is shut down, how we open that pass and allow the residents back in to get their children and stuff and get home safely. That's just one of many issues that we can come together, work together, and solve. Ladies and gentlemen, senators, thank you very much for your time here. I'm going to I'll pause here before I turn it over to Captain Sullivan. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. So any questions for Captain Carlson, Senator Keohokalole?
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Captain. Can you, well, I guess as brief as you can, help us understand the environmental processes that need to be undertaken to finish out the defueling of the sludge and the remaining residual fuel that the JTF, well, that are your responsibility once you take over?
Is there anything specific? I'm sorry.
So Admiral Wade mentioned that a portion of the defueling effort will be turned over to you, and that includes work that will need to, I guess, you're going to need to take out some of the pipe in order to get to some of the low point indentation parts of the and all that. And so he mentioned that the JTF will not be undertaking that effort, in part because separate environmental processes would need to be engaged in order to get authorization to conduct that work. Do you want to expound on that?
Yes, sir. I can hit Captain Sullivan. So following all of the same processes that the Joint Task Force did, it's going to be making sure that we have clearly defined work plans, as well as all of the protective measures that are required before any of that work begins, making sure that all penetrations are sealed, secondary containment, but truly that the work plan is clearly laid out, articulated, and been reviewed and discussed with the regulators to ensure that we are properly protecting the environment.
Okay.
I believe that's
I think to be more specific, the JTF did need to engage in an environmental assessment at one point in order to get regulatory clearance for their work. Do you foresee that as necessary in order to finish out the remainder of the defueling that needs to happen under your jurisdiction?
Sharon?
Sherry, so as we,
You gotta talk
Come
into
on.
the mic.
Yes, you need a mic.
Reason for the question is we went through this dialogue with the JTF as it relates to their environmental assessment. And so if that is the reason why that portion of the work is being handed over to the Navy, then I just want to make sure that that's what we're talking about. And if you folks have an assessment of how that impacts the timeline.
Yes, sir. So this is Sherry Ange. She's our environmentalist.
Hi, nice to meet everybody. So the cleaning of sludge out of the bottom of the tanks is part of the closure of the tanks and part of the process of tank closure. And so that's regulated under RCRA. And under RCRA, we have the same public outreach requirements as NEPA, so it's considered part of the process. So there won't be a formal NEPA document, but it will be part of the closure document.
So I guess the question is, will an additional EA be necessary or not?
Not at this time. We're not anticipating that one is required, but we will meet the substantive requirements of NEPA through the engagements that we're doing as part of closure. So you'll see still the public outreach, you'll still see the analysis and the work plans, and the public will still have a role, but there won't be a formal NEPA document.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Senator Kim, go ahead.
So what are we talking about? An estimated timeline to, one, remove all the residual sludge, and then to actually work on the complete closure? Can we break down on that?
We're anticipating 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years.
3 to
for
5
the
years
closure
right
and
now, ma'am.
Cleaning of all of the
3 to
tanks.
5 years beginning when?
Completion of defueling.
Why can't you start your planning? Because the defueling is gonna last for a while. Can't you already start with some of your process as far as the?
We are planning and we're getting everything ready, but for safety purposes, we're getting the fuel off the top of the aquifer.
No, I
That's-
understand that, but, you know, it takes a while to plan everything. I mean, we're gonna end up with years, 3 to 5 years. Part of that 3 to 5 years, what portion of that, I'd like to see a breakdown. It's gonna be used for environmental, technical, governmental approvals, whatever, which are some of the things you can start already. I mean, you know what the tanks look like, you know where the pipes are.
Yes, ma'am, and we already submitted our
You know
tank
where the
claim.
fuels are gonna be on those pipes where you can't get it out now. So I just hate to see this thing linger on. You know, if there's time that we can cut short, we should. And that's the problem, besides being transparent and listening and all of that, is, you know, working in a timely manner. I mean, we had to wait so long to even get the release of documents, the release of reports, the release of the video, you know, and that all adds to the fact that, you know, the public has a concern about the transparency and the trust in the Navy or the military.
Yes, ma'am, all valid comments. We did submit the original tank closure plan back last year, and we are up to supplement 2.
Contract is already issued.
Contract is issued, and we continue to work with DOH and EPA on defining the entire closure. So we are planning and working those right now, ma'am.
So closure is one thing. What is the intent to do with that, with the tanks and with that whole property?
That's all part of the reuse. The 3 studies ongoing that will go in front of Congress here early next year. And then there'll be follow-up talks between Hawaii and DOD
So
on what
So
what the
whatever's
future
gonna go
looks like.
before Congress, has that been talked to with the community outreach?
Ours involves the community, and those are posted on the website. Our final report will be posted here in a couple of weeks for the community to read. And I'll make sure specifically we reach out, ma'am, and let you know when that's posted.
Thank you.
Okay, questions on the left side, Senator Moriwaki, or Senator Wakai, or Senator Moriwaki,
No, fine.
Senator Wakai, Senator Awa, Senator Richards, Senator Gabbard.
Just a clarification. So earlier you made the statement that it's 3 years to clean and close. Then based on the questions from you, what is the total amount of time? We're done.
So the tanks themselves are 3 years. And then all the other factors and stuff we're approximating between that 3 and 5 year period.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that will be refined, you know, as we move through this process.
So, and Senator, I believe it is one point to also point out is that that's for the cleaning of the tank, the closure, and whatever beneficial or whatever end state becomes. But is a long-term commitment for the site cleanup. That will go for many, many years beyond the cleaning and closure. The Navy is 100% committed to the complete remediation of the Red Hill site. Don't have a time frame, but many, many years before that is complete.
Thank you.
Senator Rhodes, any questions of Captain Carlson?
Yeah, I did have a question. Yeah, kind of following up on Senator Kim's question. So you're doing planning to decide what to do with those huge empty spaces in the side of a hill. What are sort of, can you tell us what the range of options are, from, filling them up with dirt to filling them up with water, or putting weapons in there, or surveillance equipment, or what kind of things are we talking about?
I think anything's on the table, Senator, from what I've heard. There's leave them as they are, just clean them and close them. There is fill them up with sand. And then there's also the Kapuna study, not Kapuna study, is looking at, what does the community want to do with them? I've heard things as turn them into storage facility for big databases. I've also heard turn them into a brewery. So I think they can almost be anything.
Okay.
A lot of beer. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rhodes. Okay, so I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So my understanding from your slides, Admiral Wade,
Yes.
the transition from Joint Task Force to Navy will occur on March 31, 2024?
That is likely the plan, yes, ma'am. But the Secretary of Defense will make that decision specifically, and that'll be officially released in a forthcoming supplement, hopefully released in the next couple of weeks. But the plan will be Joint Task Force Red Hill will disestablish when the 60,000 gallons of residual fuel is removed, and then we'll turn over to the Navy. But it'll be a lengthy turnover process to ensure that the Navy not only watches and observes and applies the procedures for the residual fuel, but Senator, we have put together a number of processes for safety, for security, and also community engagement. And every activity that we put in place, whether it's entry control points at every entrance to ensure that we know who's in the facility and when, to escorts with every contractor, I can go on, but everything that we've implemented is up for review and implementation to ensure continuity of mission. There are a lot of lessons learned over the last several years with the spills in 2021 and also the AFFF mishap that occurred in November of 2022. When that occurred, my mission was expanded. I was originally just, you defuel, get the fuel, the threat out. But after the AFFF mishap, I was given the authorities to take centralized control of the Red Hill facility. Nothing happens in that facility without my approval. We have a risk mitigation plan. Anything that's at a significant level of risk, Admiral Aquilino actually approves. And the Navy intends to take that responsibility on. No more are we going to have 3 or 4 organizations pointing at each other and saying, it's not my problem, it's yours. There's going to be a single commander in charge, the same processes that the Joint Task Forces applied. And that turnover will occur from January through the end of March.
Okay, so I think some of the concerns from what I'm hearing from Senator Kehoe-Kalula and Senator Kim is basically that it's not a hard stop on March 31, 24. We're going to ensure that the safety protocols that the Joint Task Force has put in will continue and be taken over by the Navy. And that would ensure also, like, some of those safety measures would be the continuing sealing of the drains, right? So we don't want any ATF going into the aquifers or any kind of mishaps that occur.
Senator, that is exactly correct. I briefed the Secretary of Defense personally because he too is concerned that there not be, when we transition here, to be a drop off in safety and security. That's critical. There's been all these processes and procedures that have put in place, and that is the key to the safe transition. And that is the Department of Defense commitment. Now, to your point, and also Senator Kehoe-Kalula, The reason why not only this is going to take a long period of time, not only for the tank cleaning, but you have to sequence every activity properly to reduce risk, right? So you can't just do 50 things at once, because if you have someone that's operating 20 yards away that's dependent on electrical power, but you've secured electrical power so you don't electrocute someone working on a fan, and then someone turns it on and someone gets hurt. You have to have an integrated master plan that by time and phase, basically a project management tool. So you have to sequence that all together. It's like a symphony, with the right instrument coming in at the right time. And that's what we've done for the JTF. And that's what the Navy is going to have to do with this closure plan. That is also going to be doing all the long-term environmental remediation and testing to get after the soil and the cleaning of the aquifer.
And I'm gonna save my next question for the last person, but any other questions for Captain Carlson? Okay, so we're off to the next person, sorry.
Aloha and good afternoon. I'm Captain James Sullivan, as Vice Admiral Wade introduced earlier. I'm the Commanding Officer of Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command. And I truly have three responsibilities. And the first is to ensure the safety of the drinking water system. I'll talk about the LTM and our drinking water programs in a moment. The second is the environmental remediation of Red Hill, both now and, as I talked about earlier, in the long term. We are committed, the Navy is committed to recovering the quality of the aquifer as well as remediating Red Hill. That'll go on for many, many years after closure and tank cleaning and fueling are all complete. And the third is to support both Vice Admiral Wade as well as Admiral Barnett and the future task force that stood up by the Navy for all things defueling, closure, long-term remediation, and any of the environmental and engineering support that they might need. So the slide that I've got here is that the long-term monitoring program. Long-term monitoring was a program that was directed by the EPA and the DOH and agreed upon by the Navy and the Army following the fuel contamination of the water system back in November of 2021. It consists of 7 different periods. We are currently in period 6, but the big picture is 7,800 samples that are being taken to ensure the safety of the water quality. One thing that I think is very important to note is all of our water is none of it is coming from the Red Hill shaft. All of our water is coming from Waiaba, which is 6 miles away. So each of these different periods, we also, in addition to sampling residents and the different buildings throughout the installation, every period we also test every medical facility, every child development center, every school to ensure that we have current and relevant test results for all of those facilities. We also have working very closely with the installation and the region, developed a rapid response team. And you've probably heard about the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, or the Rapid Response Team. This is a 24/7 hotline that is available if anybody has a concern about their water quality, whether it be a test, whether they see something, they smell something, or they just have any concerns. They can call this number and we will immediately answer any questions they have, as well as send out a team that can do a rapid test to get to detect for any TPH, total petroleum hydrocarbons, as well as we can test their water for the full list of analytes that's part of our program and send it off to the mainland. So we just want to make sure that any concerns, they know who to call, how to get in touch with us, and we will take that for immediate action. As Vice Admiral Wade and Captain Carlson also mentioned, one of our primary missions is making sure that we try to rebuild the trust of our residents as well as the trust of the community, which is not an easy task, and we'll continue to work every day. We also have to ensure that we remain completely transparent on all of the results, that it's clear, that it's easily understandable. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, I list the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Safe Waters website. And this is the website that we use to post all of our information, as well as we continue to adapt and improve it every day based upon the feedback that we get from forums like this or community outreach events to continue to improve. There's interactive maps within there that if you have any questions about your drinking water, you can scroll in on the map, you can find your house, you can find your neighbor's house, and you can click on those to find out what the results from your house were. We also have created some videos that show how to utilize the website if there are any questions. And that's all within that website. The website is broken into two different sections, though. We have a drinking water, half of the website where you click and it takes you to all things drinking water, and a different section that is for the groundwater, the soil, all of the non-drinking water sampling tests and results that people are also very, very interested. This is something that we work very closely with Ernie Lau and the Board of Water Supply to make sure that we're getting them any information that they might have and to make sure that's always available to the public. So again, that's at the website that you see at the bottom right-hand corner. If you move on to the next slide, please. The focus of this slide, again, is just trying to rebuild trust and making sure that we're answering any questions that are out there. So if you look at the picture on the right-hand corner, that is a booth that we'll set up at really any forum that you would like. We do it at the mini marts that are within the installation or in the community surrounding it. We'll do it at grade schools, elementary schools, anybody who has questions or interests. And what we have at that table is I'll have a couple of my subject matter experts. They'll have the computer set up that goes to our website, the public website that anyone get to, and we'll walk anybody who has questions through the website, find the results, show them how to use it, and answer any questions that they might have. We also have the cooler and all of our testing apparatus that's on the left side of that table, just to show you what it looks like if a crew were to come into your house and to perform any sampling. The top left corner just shows the outreach of engagements that we've done recently, as well as a quote from the principal at Iroquois Point Elementary following a recent town hall or a recent event that we conducted at their elementary school. So recent events on the left, Military Affairs Council, and then of course all of the different board meetings and information forums. And then on the right talks about some upcoming events that we have, where we're going to Capelina, the night market there, the NEX at Halsey Terrace, and so forth. Go to the next slide, please. Shifting focus a little bit from the drinking water, this slide, I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, but this is also posted on our remediation website and continually updated. So this is our current remediation schedule. It shows the activities we've done to remediate as well as recover the quality of the aquifer starting in 21. And you see that it goes well beyond 2025 and will continue to populate that. But these are the current efforts. As I mentioned, the long-term remediation, we will continue to assess the site and identify what additional remediation requirements there are. But just quickly going down the left-hand side of the slide, focusing in, the top section talks about all the monitoring and the sampling efforts. As Vice Admiral Wade mentioned, we continue to monitor the soil as well as soil vapor, as well as the groundwater, all within Red Hill facility and surrounding it to ensure there is no indications that there might be a problem of a leak of any sort. We're constantly monitoring that. Below that, we get into the site characterization, mainly focusing on Adit 3, where the majority of the fuel that spilled in November of 21 spilled, was all within the Adit 3 area. A lot of the efforts that we've been doing to chase the fuel that still might be in the soil between the tunnel as well as the top of the aquifer. So these are all the characterization efforts, but the remediation continues. We're working right now to install equipment for soil vapor extraction and air sparging. This is basically where we're pumping air into the subsurface, at the same time sucking it out through different holes that we've identified where there could be potential pockets of fuel that is trapped in the soil. And we are open to continued pilots and investigation to do whatever we have to remove as much fuel as possible out of the facility. Moving down more towards the bottom, you'll see some of the modeling efforts. The Navy is doing our own groundwater modeling efforts, working with one of our contractors to identify where fuel may have traveled in the past that spilled, as well as if there were a spill to occur in the future or present, unfortunately, where that fuel might be traveling. We are also working with the University of Hawaii, who is performing an independent ground model, but we're working with them to make sure they have access and have all of the information that we have. And then the bottom is just focusing on the efforts that support defueling. Vice Admiral Wade already talked about the penetrations, making sure that every place that there is an easy, where we've drilled a hole in the past, there's a crack, or there's any penetration that could allow an easy path for fuel to travel towards the aquifer, making sure that those are all sealed. And then the groundwater protection plan are the measures that we have in place to identify, like we mentioned, the soil vapor monitoring, the groundwater monitoring. This is just a comprehensive plan of all of those actions we're doing for early detections on if there is an issue during defueling, and then what measures we would take if there were a spill to occur, what actions we would take. So I know I talked about a lot on this slide, but I do want to just foot stomp what I mentioned at the beginning. This is just the beginning. We are in this for the long haul, and we are committed to that continued remediation and recovery of the Red Hill site. Pending any questions, that was all I had for it. Now I'll pause for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so any questions of Captain Sullivan? Senator Kilpalole, Senator Kim, Senator Moriwaki has a question. Please proceed, Senator Moriwaki.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your being here for the long haul, the Navy, for remediation, and some of the efforts you've already started. But what would be the standard that you would have that it's like totally remediated? And what are you looking for in terms of your long haul years and, in terms of the outside of it?
And we're right at the beginning of that now. So we are in the process of conducting the initial step of that long-term remediation, which is the site assessment. And the site assessment is looking at a complete history of everything that's happened at Red Hill in the past. Any past spills that might have occurred, any buildings or facilities that used to be in a location and have been removed. It really is a holistic research of the facility to identify where do we need to do additional sampling. We've done a lot of sampling and characterization, but most of our efforts have focused on where the 2014 spills occurred, the 2021 spills, but we need to look at the entire site. So that's what step one is, the site assessment that's in progress now. And we'll continue with the site assessment as well as sampling for several years. So I can't tell you the exact final standard. That's all going to be developed as we complete the site assessment and then get out and actually take all those samples for areas that we identify for potential concern.
So how does that integrate with the three projects that you're looking at in terms of the closure? And is that part of the remediation effort, or is that
Some of
separate
it,
apart?
Some of it, ma'am, would be part of the closure, and it'll be done parallel path to at the same time as all of the cleaning and the final closure. So we'll be doing that sampling and investigation at the same time that they're working on all of their closure-related activities.
So there will be a comprehensive assessment plan and at least in terms of timeline and what the standards might be, 2024, 2025?
At some point, I'm not sure of the exact, it really will continue to build on itself. A lot of it is based off of what we find during the site assessment, and those sampling is going to inform how we remediate it and what the standards would be. And all of this will be done in very, very close coordination, obviously, with the regulators as we move forward.
Okay, Senator Wakai.
Thank you. Thank you for your good work, Captain. You mentioned that right now the Navy is being serviced by the Waiava well. Is there any anticipation that you will ever re-tap the Halava well?
So the Navy Halava, the Navy IAEA Halava?
Right.
Yes, the Navy IAEA Halava shaft was shut down after the fuel spills out of an abundance of caution. But there is plans and efforts to reestablish it for emergency reuse. We've been working with the Department of Health, and we've issued them a couple plans, as well as we have a project right now to put treatment on that would treat for TPH, but also any other analytes or issues within there. So to answer your question simply is, yes, we do eventually plan to turn back on the Navy IAEA Halava shaft, but there will be treatment incorporated.
I want to talk a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about the treatment facility. How much volume? What's the cost? What's the timeline for the build out of that filtration system?
So I don't have all the exact numbers. I can get back with you on some of the details, but it is the same technology that we're utilizing at the Red Hill shaft, but the Red Hill shaft is not going into the distribution system. It is going into the Hawai'i stream, but it is the granular activated carbon filtration. That's the technology that we would be utilizing at the Navy IAL Hawai'i shaft.
If in the future there was found to be some type of fuel in other areas overseen by the Board of Water Supply, would the Navy be willing to build out filtration systems for civilian use?
For that one, Senator, that would be a Navy policy decision that I do not have the authority to answer that, but that is something that would be discussed with our policymakers in DC.
Thank you.
Okay, so Senator Wah, any questions? Senator Richards?
Yeah. You made a comment about being committed to the long haul, but that's nebulous as far as a timeline. I deal with unexploded ordnance in my district, and I think that's on the books for 80 years. What do we have a commitment from the military, the Navy, as far as commitment? Because we're talking about the aquifer and oil and water. What are we looking at?
I wish I could give you an answer that would be completely satisfying. That also is definitely something that we would have to discuss with our policymakers on to bound what that timeline might be. I know and believe and have been told by our leadership that we are committed for the long term, the remediation, but I do not have a dates that bound that, sir.
And Captain, I can appreciate that. But the point is to ask that question because that is something that this body is very concerned about.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Chair Gabbard. Okay, Senator Rhodes, any questions of Captain Sullivan? Are you still on?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No questions? Okay, well, Captain Sullivan, I do have a couple of questions. And that is, according to Sharon, I'm sorry.
Sherry.
Sherry, she did not see any need for environmental assessment. However, when Vice Admiral Wade was talking about the remediation that they're going to be passing on to the Navy, it sounds like it's going to go down to like the foundational level where you folks are going to end up having to actually deconstruct some structures. Are you still of the position that there won't be a need for environmental assessments when you start looking at ground penetration and the like to remediate those?
I believe that some of that is still I think it depends on the site assessment and everything that's identified. But I don't know if we can fully answer if in the future if an environmental assessment might be required. I believe in the short term for the closure is what Ms. Haynes is talking about.
Okay, but not for any potential remediation where it looks like it's had seeped into the, like Vice Admiral was saying, I mean, sounds like it went into a structure in certain areas.
Senator, I hear your concern, and Senator Caves, and I'm going to take this back, and we're going to discuss this and come back with a more definitive answer.
Yes.
But definitely hear your concern and valid. So we're going to go back and talk about this again.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am?
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. I mean, because if the soil is contaminated, then we're talking about, like Lahaina, we're gonna have to try to figure out what happens. You folks are gonna have to try to figure out what happens to contaminated soils, right? Because we don't want that to get into the environment. I don't have any further questions at this time, but we may have some, I have some global questions at the end. So, yes, we have some global questions. So next we have Dr.
Good afternoon. Aloha, Senators. My name is Kevin Nakamura. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at the Defense Health Network Indo-Pacific. We're the regional headquarters office of the Defense Health Agency, and our office is responsible for the direct medical care to people impacted by the November 2021 Red Hill fuel spill. Next slide, please. So We are responsible also for the clinical operations at the Red Hill Clinic, which continues to operate and see patients, including military beneficiaries, as well as members of the community who qualify under the Secretarial Designation Program for care in our clinic. Next slide. The DHA is a very large organization. It's really a global organization, and it's comprised of a lot of intertwined functional areas. One of those is DHA Public Health, which we work with very closely, and their mission synergizes very well with our mission of healthcare delivery. Our colleagues at DHA Public Health asked me to provide a few short updates for your committee. So the first is that the CDC and the ATSDR conducted an EpiAid study, which included sending 11 scientists to Hawaii to look at 653 de-identified medical records. And the purpose of the study was to look at those records and to try and identify any trends that they could find in the records. They plan to release these results from their study to the public after they complete their full review. The next update is that DHA Public Health has created a course, a continuing education home study course for clinicians. And this course is available online for people to log in. They can create an account, log in, and the website is listed on the slide here. And the final update is that they are continuing to work on a third-party health registry. And the registry has been approved by DoD, and they plan to provide more updates on this as soon as they become available. So pending your questions, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So any questions, Senator Kehokalole, Senator Kim, Senator Moriwaki, please proceed.
Thank you. How many patients or people have you seen at your clinics, and what kind of outcomes, if you can, aggregate data on that, and what's being done about it if you have severe cases?
Yes, ma'am. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now. The utilization of the clinic has been relatively low. We've seen somewhere between 110 to 150 patients total, including approximately 11 to 15 secretarial designation patients. I can get you the exact numbers and I'll send those to you. As far as the trends that have been seen by the clinic, I think it's a little too early to tell. And so our job is really to gather that documentation and to have it in the medical record so that future studies, especially in conjunction with this third-party registry, can look back and try and glean any connections they can determine between the exposure history and the types of symptoms that patients are presenting with.
So are you treating patients, or is the clinic treating patients? And what kind of, I noticed that you're terminating the designation on March 10th next year. What happens thereafter if these are long-term symptoms that come out later?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The Secretarial Designation Program does terminate on March 10, 2024. At that time, records will be available to the patients so that they can take them to their primary care provider. We plan to continue to produce educational materials for providers outside of the military as well. And hopefully that will be helpful to them as they continue to take on that care from us once that secretarial designation window ends. But as far as military beneficiaries, that is an enduring mission. We will continue to care for them in our system indefinitely.
So if their records show that it did develop from the spill or from the water contaminants, will the Navy take on the responsibility for their treatment thereafter? Or you said go to your own provider, but what kind of responsibility will the Navy have on that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. Unfortunately, I can't speak for the Navy, so I'd have to refer that question to them. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Wakai, any questions? Senator Richards? Chair Gabbard? Senator Rhodes, any questions? Are you still on?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Nakamura, I have a couple of questions. The third party, why is there a hard stop on March 10, 24?
That's a great question, ma'am. That was a policy decision made by the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. So that's something that I could refer up to them for an answer. I can't speak to that myself.
Okay, so, and the reason I'm asking is because it sounds like, although, and it can be just anecdotally because I don't know, all I do is read the paper about all of these Navy families who are affected. 110 to 115 seems low to me. And knowing that there is this, the elephant in the room is that there's this lawsuit happening. My sense is the reason why it's low is because there's this distrust of entering into the clinic because of this pending lawsuit. So how do we, if the goal is to treat and learn from any, I guess, malignancy or any ailments that have occurred because of the spill, I don't understand why there's a March 10, 24 hard stop. Because I suspect you're not going to see the patients until after the lawsuit is settled.
I think, I can't speculate, but my hope is that people will take advantage of this window of time that we have to come in for that assessment visit, have the exposure documented in our medical record system. And then with that third-party registry, if these things develop over time, that will be an opportunity for us to look at it again to potentially determine if another secretarial designation window may be necessary in the future. But again, that wouldn't be a decision for DHA or myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do you have any other presenters, Vice Admiral Wade?
That's it, ma'am.
Okay, so let's open it up to global questions. I know you have some, Senator Kemp.
I do have one. So in light of everything that has taken place and all of the costs that has occurred on the state level to the aquifer, the water, the closing down of the wells, and the fact that the Board of Water Supply have said that they're going to be raising water rates for the residents to make up for all of this, what portion or what are you folks requesting, or what are you suggesting that the Navy or the military reimburse the state in order to pay for all of this? That was not, of course, of our fault or cause.
Senator, I'll take this as a senior DoD representative. Everyone here is executing policy, whether it's defueling, closure, environmental remediation, or the long-term medical. What you've asked is a policy question. We can't answer that. I have communicated to the Secretary of Defense and to the Deputy Secretary of Defense the concerns from the community regarding the potential rate hikes for the water. They're aware, they're looking at that, but that's all I can tell you right now.
Okay, can we see what exactly you folks are requesting from them or asking of them, or what? I mean, it's one thing to discuss it with them, but I mean, somebody needs to be advocating for it. That's what I'm trying to say. Is there a plan? Is there some estimate of what that cost might be? What's the ask? What might be recommended?
Well, Senator,
there needs to be something.
Senator, I think that's a question for the mayor and the Board of Water Supply, because right now the projected rate hikes are not official yet. But I can tell you that the Department of Defense writ large and the Department of the Navy are aware. They've had initial communications with the mayor's office. They've had initial communications with the Board of Water Supply. I think it's premature to understand what the impact is. Mr. Fromby at the Board of Water Supply Board of Directors highlighted that while Red Hill is a contributing factor to increased costs, that there are many other variables that are involved. So again, we can't answer that question here. That's really a question for the Department of Defense.
Okay.
And I can certainly put you in contact with the right people at the Department of Defense. I've also communicated with our congressional delegation staff. They're asking questions of the Department of Defense. But here, we just can't answer that. Okay. But I understand the community's concerns. I understand your concerns. And that's why, as the senior DoD rep here, focused on Red Hill every day, I've communicated those up to the chain of command.
Okay, Admiral, I don't expect an answer today, but I do expect that. I mean, I understand all of what you just said about, it's premature, that we don't know what the rates are, but you do know what the impacts have been on everything that's happened with the leaks, everything that's happened with closing down the water aquifer. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we would like to know. What in your estimation, having worked on this for months and seeing all the reports, what is an estimate as to what is this cost, and what portion of it might have cost the state or the city or the Board of Water Supply? I'm not asking you to determine whether or not the rates is related to this and whether it's going to be that, but there is a cost. And there is certainly a portion that we've taken on in some form or fashion. And we'd like to know what that is.
Senator, we can tell you what the cost is for everything that we're doing for defueling, for closure, for remediation, and for medical. I can't tell you what the state or the county has spent.
On the impacts of, because of the closure and so forth?
No, ma'am. I mean,
Have you asked them? Have you folks tried to get a handle?
I haven't, because that's not part of our mission. Our mission is to defuel, to close, to, the remediation piece. What it costs or what the impact is to the community because of the ancillary effects, I acknowledge that they're there, but that I don't have any visibility on
So that's
that.
not part of remediation? Any of that is not, any part of it not part of remediation?
No, it is not, ma'am. You're talking about retribution and payments. That's a separate category than the litigation. That's really for the Department of Defense. It's a policy issue.
So we do have Deputy Director Kathy Hope from the Department of Health present. So she may be able to answer how much it's costing the Department of Health to do this. Will you be able to answer that, or do you have?
I have someone who might be able to help us.
We might be able to get that earlier.
Okay, so of the Joint Task Force and on the Navy, any other questions globally?
I do.
Okay, Senator Kehokolole.
I do. For the Navy, I understand and appreciate your statement that the Navy is committed to complete remediation of Red Hill. But that doesn't necessarily afford us any specificity on outcome. As an example, almost to the date, 30 years ago, federal legislation was passed appropriating $400 million for Kaho'olawe Island cleanup and relief. And the trust fund has been depleted for over 10 years. And so it would be helpful to understand, and if it seems like the Navy's position at this point is that it's not at the point to make some sort of specific determination on what a remediation objective would actually look like. But at some point it would be nice to see one. And I'm wondering if you're able to make a commitment to specifically define what complete remediation means.
Let me go ahead and answer that, sir, as a senior DoD rep. Your point is well taken. Captain Sullivan's not the right person to be able to make that commitment, but I will personally convey your concern and your request up through my chain of command to the Department of Defense. Certainly, having an end state is critical. I'm well aware through Brigadier General Okamura on the historical aspect that you just highlighted that contributes to the larger public mistrust that I know exists. So I will carry that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Richardson.
Well, thank you. And I think this kind of falls in line with what we were talking about. My question as far as your long-term commitment, I'm concerned about the funding to back up this long-term commitment. And I appreciate, Vice Admiral, I can appreciate the fact that we have this designated and specific areas of responsibility going down the line. I think that's probably masterful as far as being able to get the job done because everybody has their area of expertise. However, to the point and the commitment long-term, we have to have the funding behind it. And I know that this group of force is not the ones to answer that question, but I'm going to reiterate some of my colleagues' concerns that, okay, what does the outcome look like? And how are we going to be assured that the funding will be there for that to occur? And that long-term commitment.
Senator,
Okay,
I will
thank you.
carry that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair Gabbard.
Excuse me. Is it Rear Admiral or Vice Admiral?
That's Vice Admiral, sir.
Vice Admiral.
Yes, sir.
Just want to make sure. Excuse me. Each of you mentioned, you talked about rebuilding trust, and both Captains Sullivan and Carlson mentioned trust. In the September 23rd edition of the Star Advertiser, in their editorial, they said, and I quote, "While most members of the Joint Task Force Red Hill charged with defueling were not responsible for past years of Navy neglect at the facility, they will have to deal with today's deep-seated, justifiable distrust of the military." And I'm sure you read that article,
I
correct?
did, yes, sir.
So my question is, and let me be clear, I believe everyone at this meeting, in person and online, we appreciate your service to our country, and we're very grateful for all of that. Nevertheless, my first question is, do you agree with that statement in the editorial that today there is a deep-seated, justifiable distrust of the military?
I do.
You do. And secondly, you had also mentioned in your engagement and your active listening, have you noticed that that's changing? What is your sense of what's actually going on out there as you're having these?
So, Senator, I don't think I've earned the right to be able to speculate like that. And that's out of respect, too, because I do respect the community's viewpoints. And I think that the best way for me to answer is that what I've learned and what I've expressed to everyone here at this table, because I will just tell you that I'm the only one that is committed on the Red Hill problem set every day. And I have a team led by General Gamora that is engaging and will talk with anybody. And what I've learned is that trust is not going to be built by just words. That's why what you just highlighted is so important. What is the end state? And how are you going to get that approach? And is there going to be sustained funding to do that? So I understand the dots that are connecting there. So what I believe, it's one action at a time, combined with the messaging to the community to explain what we're doing, being fully transparent, and then over time for the community and our elected officials to see that we know mistakes were made, that we've learned from those mistakes, and that we've willingly changed as we make the approach forward. I wish I could change time. I wish I could go back and prevent what happened in 14, 30 years ago, Huawei, where we are now, but we can't. But we at this table have been brought in specifically to address the issues that are at hand, and we're absolutely committed to do so. But again, when I go back to my opening comment, trust is earned, and it takes a long time, and we've got a lot of work to do to earn that trust. But I can tell you that the Department of Defense is absolutely committed. We are absolutely committed, and that's the best answer I could give you, Senator.
And I think the key words that I just heard are action and transparency.
Yes, sir.
So as long as you follow through with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rhodes, I don't want to forget you. Do you have any global questions of the Navy or the Joint Task Force?
Yes, thank you. I do. It's in the same vein as some of the questions that have just been asked by my colleagues, but it seems to me like the trust issue is one that it just makes me wonder what else is out there. And you, of course, the military, of course, is the one that have some idea of what else is out there. Is it depleted uranium somewhere? I mean, there's a whole range of different things it could be. But if there's going to be another Red Hill kind of disaster 5 years from now, you're never going to regain Hawaii residents' trust because it'll always be another one. So I guess it's less of a question and more of a comment that if the military is aware of other issues like this, I hope that they address them before they're forced to, like they were in the Red Hill situation. It felt to me like if it hadn't been this huge outcry, nothing would have ever happened. And if you're worried about maintaining or building trust in the community, you need to be ahead of the curve, much farther ahead of the curve than you were on Red Hill. Thank you, chairs.
Okay, thank you. So
Can I just, because I think that's a fair point from the senator. And again, I've done a lot of self-study. I've also learned by the engagements that I've had with many wonderful people that I've met in this journey. One of the things that struck me the most is that, in the Hawaiian culture and the tradition, environmental stewardship, both the land and the water, is a spiritual responsibility. What I have conveyed through my chain of command in this mission is that we as a Department of Defense must do better. We must be better stewards of the environment. We must be better teammates with the community. We have to have a symbiotic relationship. So while at the tactical level, my mission is to defuel, I hope that at the larger level, operational and strategic level, that the department can learn from what we've been trying to do here to apply it to a broader range of issues, not only in the Pacific, but globally. And I want to say it's more than just words. When the AFFF mishap occurred, if you remember, I took ownership of that issue. I did the investigation. I was very critical of the Navy, my parents' service, by not providing enough oversight, in my opinion, that should have been handled at Red Hill, given the history of the facility, but also the system. But I also made a couple of recommendations that were applied to across the entire Department of Defense. The Secretary of Defense mandated a review of all toxic chemicals and making sure that all the procedures to safeguard them, but then also to respond effectively, were reviewed and trained to. Admiral Aquilino put out a directive to all the components here in Hawaii, but then those component commanders put out guidance to all their subordinate commanders throughout the Indo-Pacific. So it's one action at a time. Again, you would think that would not have to be put out in a directive, but it was because it's so important. But I know there's a lot there. There's other areas in the country that are dealing with environmental issues, not just military, but other facilities. I think it's a global issue, but we need to do our part. We need to do better. And my commitment until my mission is complete is to share those lessons learned up through my chain of command and advocate for that. I think it's critically important. So thank you for your feedback, Senator. And I will carry that forward.
Thank you. So I do have a global question. There was an article on July 23, I believe, in Civil Beat about the former Red Hill Fuel Director, Lieutenant Commander Shannon Banks, basically being silenced. Do you know whatever? And I don't know whether you folks are going to be able to answer this question because it's probably not within your ability to do that. But do you know whatever happened to her? Because the article seemed very critical about how she tried to tell her higher ups about the 2021. Well, she did, in fact, the fuel leak, the problems with a $54 million fire suppression system, 20,000 gallons of fuel that gushed from the Red Hill pipeline that till this day is unaccounted for. When we talk about trust, we want to make sure that whistleblowers like this are not unfairly punished, right? So do you know whatever happened to her?
So Senator, thank you for your question. I'm familiar with the article. Two parts to my answer. Number one is that all occurred before we were put into this position. So I can't talk about it. The other thing, and not a satisfactory answer, but that particular issue or this issue that you reference is part of active litigation. Mm-hmm. So it'd be inappropriate for us to discuss, but it's also beyond the purview of our mission here. Again, my mission is to remove the fuel, and then everyone else has their respective missions. I will tell you though, as the senior DoD representative here, is that the Department of Defense has programs in place to protect those that identify or see issues that are concerning, and I stand by those policies.
And I appreciate that, and that's what I expected, but we needed to ask the question because I think I just read the most recent Honolulu Business magazine showing that 80% of the public really still trust the military. And you folks know, I don't know if you know, but even when the 2021 leak was publicized, the legislature didn't do really too much to try to shut it down. It was only when the 2023 AFFF leak that actually poisoned Navy families that we knew something really needed to be done. And as Senator Rhodes pointed out, we really don't need to have people hurt or injured before before we realize the enormity of what's going on, and that we want to make sure that whistleblowers are protected so that we don't just take your word for it, that you are doing everything that you can. Speaking of that, we have Department of Health Deputy Director regarding what kind of oversight has the folks in your oversight position. Maybe you should grab a mic here, Kathy. Sure. Okay, in your oversight position or the defueling, do you have any comments to make as to how well the Joint Task Force is doing? It's like 2 weeks now.
Yeah, so thank you for that question and for giving us the opportunity to come before you on this very important issue. We are satisfied with the work that the Joint Task Force is doing in defueling. We think they're doing a great job. There hasn't been any notable incidents, so that's a good thing. But if I may address some of the comments that you guys have made, I really, trust is one thing, and defueling is the first step to regaining the trust of the people of Hawaii. The second step, which is closure and remediation of our aquifer, and to fulfill your obligations and your promises that you made to the people regarding the obligations under the emergency order. Those things all coming together, I think, will really help in regaining the trust of the people. One of the comments that I wanted to address, which brought to mind, is that the comments of the senators, and I think I want to echo that, in that we really do need the Navy to feel that same sense of urgency that JTF did and importance that JTF did in defueling, in addressing the closure. So with those comments, I'm here with my small but dedicated and hardworking team of DOH people, and I have online Dennis Lopez from Safe Drinking Water. So we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
So any questions? On my right, Senator Kehokolole.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy, for that and for your work. The Department of Health is in a bit of an awkward situation as it relates to this, in that you provide the policy recommendations on all of the aspects of Red Hill to the legislature and to the public, but you also act as a regulator. And so those are at times can be awkward. It can be awkward to wear both hats at the same time. So in your discussions with the Department of Health director and with the governor, can we expect to see an established position from the administration on, at least on the long-term issues, and how would that be facilitated, given the fact that you also, facilitate this role as a regulator, where you're, I cannot find the word right now, but you're you have to sort of remain neutral and disconnected from the overall, policy prerogative of the administration.
Yeah, so
You can bring the chair.
So as the regulator, we will, our mission is to protect public health and the environment, right? That's our mission. But that may be different than the overall policy of the governor or the state of Hawaii. So if we, as a regulator, my mission really is to protect public health and the environment. There may be overarching policy questions that I don't get into because it may look to more long-term or aspirational issues that is not within the bounds of the regulations that we have to enforce.
So if you or the members of your team need to wall yourselves off from those policy determinations, I can understand that. I guess my question is, I just asked the Navy when we can expect a position on remediation, and I'm wondering if the administration will take a position that can provide some guidance to the legislature. We still maintain our own independent prerogative to come up with our own position, but I would expect at some point the administration would take the opportunity to weigh in.
I understand that the administration is different than in that respect than the regulators, because as regulators we are bound by the rules and the law, and let's say the quality of the water is also dictated by what our rule says. So, we're really just bound by the law and our rules. But for policy questions, it may be something that's, if you're looking at what is the governor's policy on X, Y, and Z, I cannot tell you that. I can't speculate as to.
So I guess I would like to relay that request to your department leadership and to the administration, because I think as things proceed, if everything goes well with the defueling, that's obviously what everyone wants and great. But as the Navy has also attested to, that's not the end of the question, and it does seem like there's some ambiguity as to what the future looks like. So it would be helpful, I think, at least for me, to have some clear guidelines as to where the boundaries are between what your shop is able to do and not do, and what the position of the state of Hawaii is as it relates to these ongoing issues. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions of Deputy Director Ho? Senator Kim? Okay, Senator Moriwaki, Richards, Chair Gabbard, Senator Rhodes.
No questions, thanks.
Okay, anything else before we close? Okay, so I want to thank everyone. It's been 2 weeks since the start of defueling. As you can tell, we had 9 senators here, which is for me a huge amount of interest. 2 of us, Senator Richards and myself, are from the neighbor islands, so we flew in for this.
Thank you.
There is statewide concern and not just over in Red Hill of what you folks are doing, because we could see, and you folks do know that, as Senator Keoholo pointed out and Senator Rhodes has pointed out, how you folks handle this going forward has repercussions not only for the Navy, but for the military in general in the state of Hawaii, right? We don't want to erode that 80% trust right now that Hawaii has for the military to be even further. But I'd like to thank you, and if we hear any more, we're gonna ask you folks to come back.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, thank you folks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are adjourned. Sorry.